Imagine a deeply personal, incredibly complex journey that goes all the way from intense psychological persecution to a profound spiritual awakening. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're exploring a totally fascinating stream of consciousness text. Honestly, it reads almost like a psychological thriller right up until it blossoms into this beautiful philosophical treatise. We're going to look at how one author's mind navigates extreme external chaos, only to figure out that the ultimate solution might just be internal harmony.
So here's our roadmap for navigating this abstract narrative. We'll be hitting 5 key sections. 1. The illusion of control. 2. The root of human crime. 3. Accountability and internal transformation. 4. The power of divine love. And finally, 5. Life as a divine script. Let's dive in.
Starting us off with Section 1, The Illusion of Control, Navigating Perceived Persecution.
The author sets the stage with a scenario that is just intensely frightening. They actually describe gadgets being used to literally write information onto their brain and ultraviolet rays programming negative defense mechanisms into them. They even go so far as to suggest that the trauma generated from this persecution is basically being packaged into scripts and sold to writers and producers globally. The really crucial point here is that the author has this intense, inescapable feeling of being watched and controlled, essentially functioning as a non-consensual test subject for psychological programming.
When you hear these exact words, you can just feel the intense paranoia and the sheer weight of this perceived interference. It brilliantly sets up the core problem of our whole journey today. How do you find any kind of peace when you genuinely believe your cognitive functions are literally being hijacked by outside forces?
Well, the author actually redefines persecution in this context. It's framed as this agonizing puzzle, like being forced into a game or some complex system of quantum mechanics. Just imagine the total frustration of feeling like invisible observers control how you communicate, intentionally making it impossible for you to solve your own problems. The text frames this as a direct, full-on assault on the author's intelligence and their agency in the world.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, The Root of Human Crime and Some Epiphanies from a Mumbai forensic lab.
So the author actually spent time working in a grueling digital forensic lab in Mumbai, constantly surrounded by evidence of human failing. And this experience sparked a really brilliant analytical epiphany. They realized that blind religious faith, just on its own, is entirely insufficient to eradicate crime from society. Instead, they propose a super powerful hybrid, marrying the scientific method, the mind that constantly asks questions and seeks causes, with the pursuit of God. This combination, they argue, can literally transform human consciousness and essentially make the world a heaven.
It all really boils down to this singular, powerful realization, identifying a simple lack of love as the literal root cause of crime and sin. Think about that in your own life for a second. How often does a lack of empathy or connection sit at the very root of a conflict? By identifying this, the author begins a profound pivot away from all that external persecution, the gadgets, the invisible observers, and moves directly toward internal, spiritual solutions.
Which brings us to Section 3, Accountability and Internal Transformation, the shift inward.
This next realization is incredibly striking. Even while harboring the firm belief that physical gadgets and ultraviolet rays are out there manipulating their mind, the author remarkably chooses to own their internal state anyway. They make the decision to view their suffering not just as an attack from the outside, but as the karmic consequence of their own past actions and an impure heart. This is a huge moment. This is where they finally take back the steering wheel. To process this radical new level of accountability, the author abstracts human life into a series of simulations. It starts with a single birth, which naturally leads to inevitable failures, right? But instead of viewing those failures as psychological tortures, they become essential life lessons. They generate the exact data needed to program a better, stronger mind.
This reframing is just incredibly powerful. The author clearly states, each time I failed, I learned the lessons. It completely dismantles the victim mindset. What we are seeing right here is a human mind actively moving from a state of debilitating paranoia to a state of purposeful, continuous, and highly structured evolution. They are quite literally reprogramming themselves.
Let's move to Section 4, The Power of Divine Love and Escaping the Forced Prosecution.
For the author, love is definitely not just some warm, fuzzy feeling. It has actual, practical mechanics. It erases the psychological belief that they are being forced into situations. It alters their consciousness so completely that their enemies are just naturally neutralized. It actively rejects hidden transactional motives. So, what you should really take away from this is that divine love acts as a literal, impenetrable defense mechanism against psychological warfare.
And notice the really specific language being used here. Even when talking about something as ethereal and magical as falling in love, the author leans heavily on their forensic scientific vocabulary. They use terms like numerical figures, data, and transactions to describe a love that perfectly transcends those exact constraints. It's a beautifully unique merging of their scientific background right alongside their spiritual awakening.
And finally, Section 5, Life as a Divine Script, the Ultimate Director.
By this point, the author's fully realized worldview has moved away from that chaotic nightmare of manipulation and into a highly organized, purposeful production. In this framework, humans are simply the actors, just trying our best to live and experience. God is the ultimate director, guiding and scripting key events to save our souls. And those terrifying invisible observers from the beginning, well, they've been recast simply as the audience, tuning in to watch the performance.
What an absolutely beautiful conclusion to that initial paranoia. Seriously, think about where we started, the sheer terror of being monitored by gadgets and scientists. Now, that exact same feeling of being constantly recorded and observed has been miraculously transformed. It's no longer a source of terror, it is a source of ultimate comfort, because the observer is now seen as a loving, divine director.
By the end of the text, the author actually admits they've forgotten the exact words they initially set out to write. But you know what? It doesn't matter. The very act of writing this text served its purpose by simulating information in their brain that generated lovely, peaceful emotions. They sign off with immense grace, sending genuine blessings to all those invisible observers they once feared. And they even include a highly specific sign-off to NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, which is just a delightfully unpredictable end to a highly unpredictable journey.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought drawn straight from the author's journey. If you change your internal frequency, if you completely alter the lens through which you view your struggles, does it fundamentally change how the universe observes you back? Thank you so much for exploring this profound script with me today. Keep asking questions and keep seeking understanding.